Hello, thank you for watching Pastor Connection. This is your host and producer, Pastor Travis Schroeder. While we were at the Acts 6-4 conference in Texarkana, Texas, we had the awesome privilege of getting to meet up with a great evangelist and speaker, Rod Vincent. I hope you enjoy this interview.
We're here at the Acts 6-4 conference in Texarkana, Texas, and I've got here a special guest with us, Evangelist Rod Vincent. It's nice to have you here today to ask you some of our typical questions, and you feel free to elaborate however you need to. So tell us a little bit about who you are and where you're from.
That might take all day, but I'm from Lake Charles, Louisiana. Got saved in Houston, Texas. Got filled with the Holy Ghost in Lake Charles, Louisiana, and been an evangelist for going on 41 years. Been pastor 2 churches, total 5 years, but mostly I've been an evangelist. That's my calling in the ministry.
So it sounds like you've done a lot of different ministries, but what are you currently doing now?
I'm an evangelist.
You're an evangelist.
Sure.
So what does you're the first evangelist I've got to interview so far. So what exactly does an evangelist do?
Well, I'm as they call, itinerary evangelist. I go all over the country. I've been in 43 states of America, 5 foreign countries, and we preach revivals and see souls saved, see people baptized in the Holy Ghost, and people healed, and the church revived, ready for the rapture of the church.
Awesome. That's awesome. So you have a definite heart for seeing people's lives transformed for the glory of God. And I've got the pleasure of seeing you minister a couple of different times. Everything I do always seems to revolve around Springfield, Missouri, because that's where I'm from. And you've been up there when I was a youth pastor at Faith Assembly in Springfield, and it's just been a great. I love your preaching, your style. It's amazing. I just tell that you're anointed by God. As part of letting people know that we're just regular people, every pastor tends to have a different Bible verse that they find is their favorite. What would you say is your favorite Bible verse?
My favorite, well, there's a lot of favorites, of course. Matthew 6:33, seek ye first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and all these things shall be added unto thee.
Yes.
And that's whenever I write off into a card or a thank you card or all my birthday cards for my 2 daughters and my wife, I'll sign off with Matthew 6:33.
All right.
Seek ye first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and all these things shall be added unto thee.
So my next question is, who's your favorite Bible character? And I know a lot of people, we run to Jesus, and go, Jesus is my favorite Bible character, and that's okay. But what would you say?
My favorite Bible character is the Apostle Paul. And Evangelist Paul. And I believe Paul had all 5 gifts, but Paul is my favorite character, other than Jesus, of course.
Yeah, well, I like Paul. I'm actually in a sermon series right now on walking in the Spirit, and I'm talking about Paul in Romans chapter 7, where he's going back and forth, and basically he's saying, I know what I'm supposed to do, and I seem to not do it, and then I know what I shouldn't do, and I end up messing up and doing it anyway. And I think that, as ministers and any Christian, that really helps us to understand that somebody that wrote over half the New Testament still has struggles every day, and that's a real faith builder, I think, for me.
Well, I also believe Paul's writings was for correction, and he went into a lot of places, and of course, the Bible always refers to him taking 3 missionary journeys. I agree with the first journey, it might have been a missions trip, but the reason why I call him evangelist, Paul, is because he went back 2 other times because he had to go back to those churches and to correct, because somebody was coming behind him and changing the doctrines that he had already established and preached in those churches. So I call him Evangelist Paul.
Yeah.
And his teachings are most of it's for correction.
Right. Well, now as pastors, preachers, we always have those times where we're like, oh man, we walk out of the church and we're like, that was the greatest thing. God moved in such an awesome way in that service, and and we go home and we feel great. But then there's those times where it's like, did that just happen? And, those times that something funny happened, or what you might call the worst thing that happened. Do you have anything like that?
Well, all my friends, all my preacher buddies are going to laugh at this. About all my mistakes and stuff that's happened through all these years. But I remember one time I was called upon to preach at a church it was in New Jersey, and I was supposed to meet the pastor, and who I thought was the pastor, and he was very much had a lot of responsibility, and he was kind of like, he wasn't a co-pastor, but he was helping the pastor. I didn't know this. I thought he was the pastor, and I had to leave from Allentown, Pennsylvania, at a truck stop to follow him to this area where I was going to be preaching at, and it was like 60 miles. And we just kept driving, and finally when I got there to preach, I preached that night, and I kept referring to this particular pastor that I thought was the pastor, and he was not the pastor. And ended up after the service, found out that it was another man that was the pastor, and I kept referring to him about what I was preaching about. Like, Pastor so-and-so is going to have to do this, and Pastor so-and-so needs to do this, and Pastor so-and-so needs this type of member of the church, and I was talking to the wrong pastor. And so after church they said, well, Brother Vincent, we want to introduce you to our pastor. And it's somebody else.
That's great.
And I still go to that church, and I still preach for that pastor.
That's awesome.
We laugh about it all the time. So.
Now, as far as, we've got things like that we look back on and we laugh, but as ministers, we face certain, I hate to use the word fear, but different concerns in our ministries. What would be your biggest concern in ministry?
My biggest concern in ministry concerns the church. Mm-hmm. And that's one reason why we're here at Acts 6:4. That's one reason why Acts 6:4 was birthed, was out of concern of retaining our Pentecostal doctrines. My biggest fear has always been that we would lose a generation of Pentecost. Mm-hmm. And of course, I preached probably 22 youth camps years ago, and 16 or 17 district Assembly of God camps. And my goal was always, of course, to get young people saved, but I wanted to get them also filled with the baptism. And that's been one of our goals. It's been one of my fortes as an evangelist, to get our people filled and refilled with baptism, and not lose Pentecost in our Pentecostal churches.
I met a minister a couple of weeks ago. I went to a revival service, and he said, back in the day when people would get saved, the first thing the pastors would say is, we need to get these people baptized in the Holy Ghost. And he's like, you can't, you're not going to be able to make it through the day without being baptized in the Holy Ghost. And he says, man, I can't go to the grocery store without being baptized in the Holy Ghost, because we got to have that.
We're saying Walmart now.
Yeah. So because it's such an important part of who we are and our ability to share the gospel. So I think that's awesome, what you're doing. And
I was blessed to get saved in a Pentecostal full gospel church, Assembly of God Church, in Houston, Texas, in 1975, and it wasn't a perfect church, but it was a balanced Pentecostal church. And whenever they needed revival, whenever they knew they needed revival, they had revival.
Absolutely. So I just want to say thank you so much for what you do. Thank you for allowing me to interview you today.
Thank you. I was honored to do it. Thank you very much.
It's a blessing, and I look forward to hearing more about what God does through you in the future. And thank you guys for joining us on Pastor Connection today. We look forward to seeing you in the future. God bless.
Amen.